I'm Amber Mitchell, 28 years old, and I never expected to spend my birthday standing in the rain, staring at boxes of my belongings stacked on the front porch. My stepmother Diane smiled coldly as my father avoided my eyes. Happy birthday, by the way. Consider this your present. Motivation to finally grow up. I left in tears, vowing they'd regret this day. Before we get into my story of betrayal and revenge, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family do you dirty. Trust me. What happened next will make your jaw drop. My mother died when I was 12, leaving a hole in my heart that never truly healed. Dad remarried when I was 14, bringing Diane into our lives. In the beginning, she seemed kind and understanding, always making an effort to include me in family activities and asking about my day. That facade crumbled almost immediately after the wedding. The warm smiles disappeared, replaced by cold stares and criticism about everything from my grades to how I dressed. 2 years later, Diane's daughter Jessica moved in with us. Jessica was the same age as me, but in Diane's eyes, she was perfection incarnate. While I wore secondhand clothes and worked part-time jobs through high school, Jessica got designer outfits and a brand new car for her 16th birthday. Dad never seemed to notice the disparity in treatment, or if he did, he chose to ignore it to keep the peace. I tried my best to be the perfect daughter. I maintained straight A's, got into a good college, and even stayed at home during my university years to save money. I paid rent to my father, helped with chores, and tried to minimize my presence in the house. Nothing was ever enough. After being kicked out, I spent that rainy night sleeping in my beat-up Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot. The humiliation burned worse than the cold. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a call from my best friend Zoe. "Amber, where are you? I've been texting for hours." Her voice was thick with concern. "They kicked me out, Zoe," I whispered, trying not to cry again. "On my birthday." "What? Who kicked you out?" "Dad and Diane." I came home early from work, excited about dinner, and there were boxes with all my stuff on the porch. "That's insane. Come stay with me until you figure things out," Zoe insisted. I accepted her offer gratefully, but the next morning brought an even worse shock. I checked my bank account to find it completely drained. The $18,000 I'd saved from years of working had vanished. It was a joint account with my father that I'd never gotten around to changing a mistake I would forever regret. Furious and desperate, I drove back to the house. Dad answered the door with Diane hovering behind him like a vulture. "Where's my money?" I demanded, shoving my phone in his face to show the empty account. "That's rent," he replied coldly. "We discussed this." "Rent? $18,000? We never discussed anything." My voice rose to a shout. "Lower your voice, young lady," Diane snapped. "Your father and I have been carrying you for years. That money barely covers what you owe us." I stood there in shock, searching my father's face for any sign of the man who used to tuck me in at night and tell me I was his greatest treasure. There was nothing there but a stranger avoiding my eyes. From the staircase behind them, Jessica was recording the entire scene on her phone, a smirk playing on her perfectly glossed lips. The ultimate humiliation, my breakdown, was being documented for her entertainment. As I turned to leave, defeated and broke, I heard Diane say to my father, "Finally got rid of the dead weight." The door closed behind me with a finality that broke something inside me. In that moment, standing on the porch where I'd grown up, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rise from these ashes, and they would live to regret what they'd done. Living with Zoe was a temporary solution at best. Her one-bedroom apartment barely had room for her, let alone another person. I slept on her lumpy couch, my clothes still packed in the boxes my family had so unceremoniously filled. Every morning, I woke with a crick in my neck and the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing down on my chest. Job hunting was a nightmare. Despite my business degree with a specialization in accounting, entry-level positions were scarce. Each day, I sent out dozens of applications only to receive automated rejections or, worse, complete silence. My savings were gone, my car was running on fumes, and my pride was in tatters. "You can stay as long as you need," Zoe assured me. but I could see the strain it was putting on her relationship with her boyfriend, Brian. Their apartment wasn't designed for 3 adults, and privacy had become a luxury none of us could afford. One night, I overheard them arguing in the bedroom. "I feel bad for her too," Brian whispered harshly. "But it's been 3 weeks. We can't keep housing her for free." "What am I supposed to do?" "She has nowhere else to go," Zoe defended. "She has a degree, doesn't she? She needs to try harder to find work instead of freeloading." His words stung, especially because there was truth to them. I wasn't paying rent, barely contributing to groceries, and essentially becoming the burden Diane had always accused me of being. The next day, I expanded my job search to include anything that would pay. After dozens of applications to coffee shops, retail stores, and restaurants, I finally landed a position as a waitress at a 24-hour diner called Sunrise Cafe. The pay was minimum wage plus tips, and the hours were brutal 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., but it was something. My first week was a crash course in humility. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and the smell of grease permeated everything I owned. But for the first time in weeks, I had purpose, and more importantly, income. Just as I was starting to find my footing, fate decided to kick me while I was down. One night during my shift, a group of familiar faces walked into the diner at 2 a.m. Jessica and her friends, clearly coming from a night of clubbing, sat in my section. The recognition in Jessica's eyes turned quickly to malicious delight. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, loudly enough for the entire diner to hear. "It's Amber! Guys, this is my stepsister, the one I told you about who got kicked out." Her friends giggled as I stood there, order pad in hand, trying to maintain what little dignity I had left. "What can I get you?" I asked, my voice impressively steady. For the next hour, they tormented me with complicated orders, complaints about the food, and snide remarks about my appearance. When they finally left, there was no tip, just a mess, and a napkin with a crude drawing of a girl crying. Later that night, Jessica posted photos of me in my waitress uniform on social media with the caption, "Look who's serving us tonight. Fallen star disinherited sister." I managed to hold it together until my break, then locked myself in the storage closet and broke down. How had my life fallen apart so completely? A month ago, I was a college graduate with dreams and prospects. Now I was hiding in a closet, crying over spilled milkshakes and social media mockery. The door to the storage closet opened suddenly, and I scrambled to wipe my tears. Michelle, the night manager, stood there with a concerned expression. "Sorry," I mumbled, embarrassed at being caught. "I just needed a minute." "Those girls were awful to you," Michelle said, sitting down on a crate across from me. I was about to step in when they left. "One of them is my stepsister," I admitted. "My family kicked me out on my birthday last month, and they think it's hilarious that I ended up here." Instead of the pity I expected, Michelle's face hardened with understanding. "My father threw me out when I was 19 because I got pregnant," she shared. "I waitressed for years, raising my son alone. Now I own 3 restaurants, and he wants to pretend he was supportive all along." She studied me for a moment. "You handle the register well. Do you have any accounting experience?" "I have a business degree with a focus in accounting," I replied, surprised by the question. Michelle nodded as if confirming something to herself. "I need help with the books. Our accountant only comes once a month, and I'm drowning in paperwork. It's only a few hours a week. But if you're interested, we can work around your waitressing schedule." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a way to use my education and perhaps begin rebuilding my life. Little did I know, this small opportunity would be the foundation of everything that came next. 3 months after being kicked out, my life had stabilized barely. I was working double shifts at the diner as both a waitress and the bookkeeper, sleeping during the day, and scraping together enough money to rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, just 400 square feet with a kitchenette, a bathroom where the shower practically touched the toilet, and a futon that served as both my bed and couch, but it was mine. No one could kick me out on a whim. My first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout directly from the container, surrounded by the few belongings I'd managed to salvage from my old life. The apartment was sparse but clean, I'd found most of my furniture at thrift stores or on the sidewalk on bulk trash day. My pride had taken a beating, but I was surviving. One afternoon, while grocery shopping at the discount store near my apartment, I ran into Mrs. Patel, our family's longtime neighbor. She greeted me with a warm hug and concerned eyes. "Amber, dear, how are you? I haven't seen you at the house in months." "I moved out," I replied, the sanitized version of events I'd perfected for casual acquaintances. It was time to be independent. Mrs. Patel gave me a look that said she wasn't fooled. "Your father's business is struggling, you know." I overheard him telling my husband they might have to downsize if things don't improve by year's end. This was news to me. My father's construction company had always been successful, lucrative enough to fund Jessica's shopping habits and Diane's frequent spa trips. "And that stepsister of yours dropped out of college again," Mrs. Patel continued, lowering her voice. "Third time in 2 years. Spends all her time partying while her mother makes excuses. Such a waste." I nodded, absorbing this information with unexpected satisfaction. Their perfect facade was cracking. For a brief moment, I felt vindicated, but I quickly pushed the feeling away. Their problems weren't my concern anymore. Or so I told myself. Later that week, I was serving coffee at the diner when a familiar face caught my attention. Dr. Reynolds, my favorite professor from college, was sitting alone in a booth, reading through papers. "Dr. Reynolds?" I approached tentatively. He looked up, recognition dawning on his face. "Amber Mitchell. What a pleasant surprise. Are you working here?" "Yes, sir. For now," I added, feeling the need to clarify that serving eggs at 2 a.m. wasn't my life's ambition. "Sit down for a minute if you can," he invited. "I've been wondering how you were doing. You were one of my most promising students." I glanced at Michelle, who nodded her permission, and slid into the booth across from him. "To be honest, things have been challenging," I admitted. "Family issues forced me to move out suddenly, and finding work in accounting has been harder than I expected." Dr. Reynolds frowned. "That's disappointing to hear. You were exceptionally talented with financial analysis." "Thank you," I said, warmed by his confidence in me. "I'm actually doing some bookkeeping here at the diner, so at least I'm using some of my skills." "Interesting timing," he mused. "I'm actually consulting for a tech startup that desperately needs someone with accounting expertise. They're growing faster than expected and need to professionalize their financial systems. It's an entry-level position, but with room to grow. Would you be interested in interviewing?" My heart raced. Absolutely. 2 weeks later, I accepted a position as a junior financial analyst at NextGen Solutions, a startup developing innovative supply chain software. The salary was modest by industry standards but felt like a fortune compared to my waitress earnings. I gave notice at the diner for my serving shifts. But when I tried to resign from the bookkeeping position, Michelle had other ideas. "Don't quit on me," she said. "I need you. How about this, keep doing the books part-time, evenings or weekends, whatever works with your new job. I'll pay you consultant rates." "Consultant rates?" I echoed. $75 an hour, she specified. "And there's something else you should know. I don't just own this diner. I own 3 restaurants in the city. If you can handle the books for all of them, I'll bump it up to 100. It was an opportunity too good to pass up. With my new tech job during the day and Michelle's bookkeeping work in my off hours, I was suddenly looking at a significant income. For the first time since being kicked out, I felt a surge of confidence about my future. That night in my tiny apartment, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. Column 1. My projected income from both jobs. Column 2. My essential expenses: rent, utilities, food, insurance, student loan payments. The difference between the 2 columns made me grin. With careful budgeting, I could start building savings again. But as I stared at the growing numbers, a new thought emerged, dark and seductive. I could do more than just survive. I could thrive. And eventually, I could make my family regret what they'd done to me. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy. But I was smart, determined, and now properly motivated. I wouldn't stoop to their level with petty acts of revenge. No, my revenge would be living well and making sure they saw every minute of it. I created a new tab in my spreadsheet and titled it The Plan. It began with paying off debt and building an emergency fund, then moved to investments and eventually property ownership. At the bottom of the page, I typed a single line: "Success is the best revenge." As I turned off my laptop and prepared for bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation for the future. My father, Diane, and Jessica had tried to break me, but instead, they'd created something new, someone determined, focused, and unencumbered by false family loyalty. They would see, eventually. I'd make damn sure of it. 1 year after being kicked out on my birthday, my life had undergone a transformation that sometimes surprised even me. My role at NextGen Solutions had expanded from junior analyst to finance manager after I uncovered a costly error in their cash flow projections that saved the company thousands. My boss, impressed by my attention to detail and dedication, promoted me with a substantial raise. Meanwhile, my work for Michelle's restaurants had evolved into a comprehensive financial management role. I'd implemented new accounting software across all 3 locations, streamlined their tax preparation process, and identified several areas where they were overspending. Michelle was so pleased with the results that she made an unexpected offer over coffee one rainy afternoon. "I'm opening 2 new locations next year," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "I want you to have a 10% ownership stake in each of them." I nearly choked on my latte. "What?" "Michelle, I can't afford to invest in restaurants." She waved away my concern. "It's not about money. It's about value. You've increased my profits by 20% this year alone. Consider it performance-based compensation." With my growing income from both jobs, I was finally in a position to look beyond mere survival. I'd paid off my student loans, built a healthy emergency fund, and was ready for my next step: property investment. After weeks of research and viewings, I found it a small, neglected duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The price was low because the property needed work, but the structure was sound and the location had potential. Using my savings for the down payment, I became a property owner at 29. The duplex needed significant renovations, which led me to reconnect with Tyler Mason, a friend from high school who now ran his own contracting business. I remembered him as a quiet, thoughtful boy who'd always been kind to me, even when others weren't. "Amber Mitchell." He grinned when he arrived to give me an estimate. "I heard you were back in town." Tyler had grown from a lanky teenager into a confident man with capable hands and thoughtful eyes. As he walked through the property, pointing out issues and suggesting solutions, I found myself noticing the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders and how his smile lit up his entire face. "I can give you the friends and family discount," he offered as we sat on the porch steps, reviewing his detailed proposal. "This is a solid investment. The neighborhood is changing fast. I can pay your regular rates," I insisted. "I don't expect special treatment." "It's not special treatment," he countered. "It's good business. You'll tell people about my work, and I'll get more clients." Over the next 2 months, Tyler and his crew transformed the duplex, while I threw myself into learning everything about property management. We fell into a routine. I'd stop by after work to check progress, and we'd end up talking long after his crew had left, sharing pizza on the floor of the half-finished living room or drinking beer on the porch. Somewhere between choosing cabinet finishes and debating the merits of different flooring options, our friendship evolved into something more. Our first kiss happened naturally, after a long day when we'd both been painting walls until our arms ached. We'd been laughing about some shared high school memory when suddenly the laughter faded, replaced by something electric between us. With the renovations complete, I moved into one half of the duplex and rented out the other unit, generating income that covered most of my mortgage. My tiny studio apartment was a thing of the past. As my financial situation improved, I allowed myself small luxuries: a new wardrobe that reflected my professional status, a proper haircut at a salon instead of the budget chain where I'd been going, a reliable car to replace my struggling Honda. These weren't frivolous splurges, but calculated investments in my new identity. I also decided it was time to emerge from my self-imposed social media blackout. After being kicked out, I'd deleted all my accounts, unable to bear the sight of Jessica's posts about family vacations and expensive purchases likely funded with my stolen savings. With Tyler's encouragement, I created new profiles under my name. I wasn't interested in amassing followers or creating envy-inducing content. I simply wanted to establish a visible presence, a digital footprint that showed I hadn't disappeared or been destroyed. I kept my posts professional and authentic photos of my newly renovated home, snapshots of business conferences I attended, the occasional picture with Tyler or Michelle. I didn't mention my family or my past struggles. The narrative I was crafting was one of success and contentment, not bitterness or victimhood. It took less than a week for Jessica to find my new profile and send a friend request. I ignored it. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I still knew by heart despite having deleted it months ago. Amber? My father's voice sounded older than I remembered. I saw you're on social media again. You look well. I am well, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Your business seems to be doing good. Finance, right? Always knew you had a head for numbers. I almost laughed at the audacity. Did you need something, Richard? The use of his first name rather than Dad wasn't lost on him. There was a pause before he continued. Actually, I was hoping to get your advice on something. The business is having some cash flow issues, and I remembered how you always had a knack for sorting out those kinds of problems. So that was it. Not concern for my welfare. Not regret for how they'd treated me, but a need for my expertise now that they were struggling. I'm very busy these days, I replied coolly. Between my executive position and my real estate investments, my schedule is quite full. Real estate? He sounded surprised. You own property now? Yes. And I'm afraid I don't have time for freelance consulting work. You might try contacting an accounting firm. Amber, please. His voice took on a desperate edge I'd never heard before. It's family. The word hit me like a slap. Family? That's interesting. I distinctly remember being told I wasn't family anymore when you and Diane packed my belongings and changed the locks, or when you stole my life savings. That was a misunderstanding. Goodbye, Richard. Don't call again. I ended the call and stood in my beautiful new kitchen, trembling not with fear or sadness, but with power. For the first time since that rainy birthday night, I felt completely in control. My life was no longer defined by what they had taken from me, but by what I had built for myself. As I fixed myself a glass of wine and moved to the comfortable living room I'd designed, I realized the revenge I'd once fantasized about was already beginning, not through elaborate schemes, but simply through living well and refusing to be manipulated. And this was just the beginning. 2 years after being evicted from my childhood home, I barely recognized my own life. My career at Next Gen Solutions had accelerated when our CFO departed unexpectedly, creating a leadership vacuum I was uniquely positioned to fill. At 30, I became the youngest chief financial officer in the company's history. Michelle's restaurant franchise had expanded to 6 locations across the city, with my 10% ownership in the newer establishments providing a steady stream of passive income. My consulting work for her had evolved into a formal business arrangement where I served as the financial director for her growing empire. Tyler and I had moved beyond casual dating into a serious relationship. We'd fallen into an easy partnership, both personally and professionally. He continued to help me expand my real estate portfolio, which now included 3 properties, the original duplex, a small 4-unit apartment building, and a fixer-upper single-family home we were renovating together on weekends. My financial stability had transformed into genuine prosperity, and I was no longer motivated by survival or even success. I was building wealth, security, and the life I deserved, one that couldn't be taken away on someone's whim. Through casual conversations with old acquaintances, I kept tabs on my former family. The news was consistently grim. My father's construction business was facing bankruptcy after a series of poor investments and mismanagement. The family home, the house I'd grown up in, was on the market, as they could no longer afford the mortgage payments. Jessica had cycled through 3 different colleges without completing a degree. While continuing her expensive lifestyle of designer clothes and exotic vacations, a lifestyle they clearly could no longer sustain. I was browsing real estate listings one evening when Tyler peered over my shoulder at my laptop screen. "Isn't that your old neighborhood?" he asked, recognizing the street name. "Yes," I admitted. "My father's house just went on the market." Tyler studied me for a moment. "Are you thinking about buying it?" The question caught me off guard, but once spoken, the idea took root. I hadn't considered it, but it would be poetic justice, wouldn't it? Only if it's a good investment, he cautioned. Don't make business decisions based on emotions. He was right, of course. I closed the laptop, pushing the thought away. But later that night, as Tyler slept beside me, I reopened the listing. The house was severely overpriced for the current market, especially given its dated interior and the repairs it needed. My father was clearly hoping for a quick sale at a premium to solve his financial problems. The next day, I received an unexpected text from Jessica. It was the first direct contact she'd attempted since I'd ignored her social media request. Need to talk. Important. Family stuff? The message read. I ignored it. 3 more texts followed over the next 2 days, each more urgent than the last. Finally, my phone rang with her number. What do you want, Jessica? I answered coldly. Can we meet? Please? It's about Dad. She sounded desperate, her usual smugness absent. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at an upscale restaurant downtown, one I knew from social media stalking that she favored for its Instagram-worthy cocktails and celebrity sightings. I arrived 15 minutes late deliberately, dressed in a tailored suit straight from a board meeting. Jessica was already seated, fidgeting with her napkin. She'd attempted her usual polished look, but I noticed the scuffed heels and the slightly faded designer bag signs that her usual shopping sprees had been curtailed. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. What's so urgent about your father? My use of your father rather than our father wasn't lost on her. She flinched slightly. He's in trouble, Amber. The business is going under, the house is in foreclosure, and he's not handling it well. That sounds like a personal problem, I said, signaling to the waiter for a drink. Look, I know things ended badly between you guys. Ended badly? I interrupted. Jessica, he and your mother threw me out without warning, stole my savings, and left me homeless. That's not ending badly. That's criminal. She had the decency to look ashamed. I know. It was wrong. I know that now. Your newfound moral clarity is touching, I said sarcastically. What exactly do you want from me? Jessica took a deep breath. We need help, financial help. Just a loan to get through this rough patch. Dad's too proud to ask you himself, but I know you're doing well. Your new house? Your job? You're successful now. And why would I help the people who tried to destroy me? Because despite everything, you're a good person, she said, her eyes welling with tears that seemed almost genuine. And he's still your dad. The waiter arrived with our drinks. I took a long sip of my martini, watching Jessica over the rim of my glass. She was playing a role, the remorseful stepsister seeking reconciliation, but beneath it, I sensed calculation. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Jessica's expression brightened slightly. About $150,000. Just enough to clear the most pressing debts and keep the house until the business recovers. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering it. And let me guess your mother sent you to ask, because she thought I'd be more likely to say yes to you? Jessica's silence was confirmation enough. When the bill came, Jessica reached for her wallet and then paused, a flash of panic crossing her face. I left my credit card at home, she said, the lie transparent. I paid without comment, leaving a generous tip that I knew would register with her as a display of my financial comfort. I'll think about the loan, I said as we parted outside the restaurant. Tell your father to send me the business financials so I can review them. The relief on Jessica's face was palpable. Thank you, Amber. Really. What Jessica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already been thinking about their financial situation, but not in the way they hoped. The next day, I contacted a business associate who specialized in distressed debt acquisition. Through his company, I anonymously purchased my father's business loan from the bank that was about to call it due. I now effectively controlled the fate of his company without his knowledge. A week later, I made an anonymous, lowball offer on the family house through a shell company I'd established. The offer was predictably rejected, but it sent a message to the market that the property might not be worth the asking price. These weren't acts of revenge, they were calculated business moves. By controlling my father's debt, I gained leverage. By manipulating the sale of the house, I positioned myself to potentially acquire it at a fair market value rather than the inflated price they desperately needed. I wasn't interested in destroying them. That would be too quick, too merciful. I wanted them to understand the true meaning of dependence and gratitude. I wanted them to experience what I had experienced, the vulnerability of having your future in someone else's hands. And soon, they would discover exactly whose hands held their fate. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday heavy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering announcing the wedding of my cousin Rachel to her longtime boyfriend. Under normal circumstances, I would have sent a gift and my regrets. Family gatherings had been firmly off my agenda since the night I was thrown out. But these weren't normal circumstances. 2 years of careful planning had positioned me perfectly, and the wedding offered an opportunity. I couldn't resist the chance to reveal my success to the entire extended family at once. "Are you sure about this?" Tyler asked as we dressed for the ceremony. "You don't have to prove anything to these people." I adjusted his tie, appreciating how handsome he looked in his charcoal suit. "It's not about proving something. It's about reclaiming my place in the family narrative. For 2 years, they've been telling everyone who would listen that I'm a failure, a disappointment. Today, that story changes." We arrived at the vineyard venue in Tyler's new Tesla, a recent splurge he'd justified as a business expense for meeting high-end clients. The effect was exactly as I'd hoped. Heads turned as we pulled into the parking area filled with modest sedans and aging SUVs. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a designer dress in a subtle shade of blue that conveyed sophistication without ostentation, paired with the diamond earrings I'd bought myself to celebrate my promotion to CFO. My hair, once long and often pulled back in a practical ponytail, was now cut into a sleek bob that framed my face and conveyed confidence. We were among the last to arrive, ensuring that our entrance would be noticed. As we walked from the parking area to the ceremony site, I felt eyes tracking our movement. Whispers followed in our wake relatives who barely recognized the polished, successful woman I'd become. The ceremony was lovely, but I barely noticed the vows or the scenic backdrop. I was hyper-aware of my father, Diane, and Jessica seated 3 rows ahead of us, their shoulders tense as if they sensed my presence but couldn't bring themselves to turn around and confirm it. At the reception, I deliberately kept my distance from them, instead circulating among aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. I answered questions about my career and personal life with calm confidence, neither exaggerating my success nor downplaying it. The truth was impressive enough without embellishment. "Amber." My father's voice behind me was hesitant, almost fearful. I turned to face him, maintaining a pleasant expression despite the surge of emotions his presence triggered. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his posture slightly stooped as if under invisible weight. "Hello, Richard," I replied, my voice steady and cool. You look wonderful," he said, his eyes taking in my appearance with a mixture of pride and uncertainty, as if unsure whether he had any right to feel proud of the daughter he'd discarded. "I always knew you'd succeed." The audacity of this claim might have angered me once, but now it merely amused me. "Did you? That's not the message I received when you packed my belongings and changed the locks." He flinched at the reminder. "That was a complicated time." Complicated. I repeated the word, letting its inadequacy hang in the air between us. "Is that what we're calling it?" Before he could respond, Diane appeared at his side, her arm sliding possessively through his. If my father looked older, Diane looked harried, the immaculate appearance she'd always maintained now showing signs of strain. Her designer outfit was from several seasons ago, her jewelry less ostentatious than I remembered. "Amber," she greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here. You're looking well." "Thank you," I replied, noting how it cost her to offer even this small compliment. "Congratulations on Jessica's graduation." "Oh wait, she didn't graduate, did she?" Third attempt wasn't the charm after all. Diane's face hardened at the barb, but she maintained her facade. "Jessica is finding her path. Not everyone is as focused as you always were." Tyler appeared at my side then, sensing the tension and offering silent support. I introduced him. watching as my father and Diane registered both his obvious devotion to me and the understated signals of his success. "We should find our seats," Tyler suggested diplomatically. "It was nice meeting you both." As we turned to leave, my father touched my arm gently. "Amber, could we talk later? Privately? About family matters." The desperation in his eyes told me exactly what family matters meant, the financial crisis he still didn't know I was intimately familiar with. Of course, I agreed with a smile that revealed nothing. "Find me after dinner." Throughout the meal, I could feel their eyes on me from their table across the room. Jessica had joined them now, her expression a mixture of resentment and curiosity as she observed my interactions with our extended family. Where once she had been the center of attention, the golden child everyone admired, now relatives were stopping by our table to chat with me, clearly impressed by the successful young couple we presented. After the main course but before dessert, my father approached our table again. "Can we talk now? Outside, perhaps?" Tyler squeezed my hand under the table, a silent question asking if I wanted him to join us. I shook my head slightly. This conversation needed to happen one-on-one. We walked to a small gazebo at the edge of the vineyard, far enough from the reception for privacy. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds, and a cool breeze carried the scent of grapes and distant music. "I've been wanting to reach out," my father began, his hands fidgeting nervously. "Things have been difficult lately." "So I've heard," I replied neutrally. He looked surprised. "You've been keeping tabs on us?" "Let's just say news travels in business circles. Your company's financial troubles aren't exactly secret." He seemed to deflate further at this confirmation that his failures were common knowledge. "Then you know we're in trouble. The business, the house, everything's falling apart. And you think I can help?" I stated rather than asked. "I wouldn't ask if there were any other option," he said, his voice dropping. "The banks won't extend any more credit. We're about to lose everything." "Including the money you took from me?" I couldn't resist asking. "My $18,000 that was supposedly rent?" To his credit, he looked genuinely ashamed. "That was wrong. I know that now. Diane insisted we needed it for Jessica's tuition, but that doesn't excuse what we did to you." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "Just help. A loan, advice, anything. You've always been good with money. Always been the responsible one." I studied him in the fading light. This man who had once been my hero, who had tucked me in at night and taught me to ride a bike, who had later betrayed me so completely that I'd been forced to rebuild my life from nothing. "Like you helped me on my birthday 2 years ago?" I asked softly. The color drained from his face as understanding dawned. "You know, about the foreclosure, the bankruptcy filing, the rejected offer on the house?" "Yes, Richard. I know everything." "How?" "Because in business, information is power," I explained. "And unlike you, I've become very good at business." I let him absorb this, watching the realization spread across his features that I wasn't just aware of his problems, I was somehow connected to them. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Nothing yet," I replied truthfully. "But what I could do?" "That's the question you should be asking." I left him standing in the gazebo, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his shoulders. As I walked back to the reception, I felt neither triumph nor pity, but something more complex, the calm certainty that justice, long delayed, was finally within reach. The days following the wedding brought a flurry of desperate communication from my former family. My father called repeatedly, each voicemail more pleading than the last. Diane sent formal emails requesting a family meeting to discuss mutual interests. Even Jessica reached out via text, her messages veering between thinly veiled threats and awkward attempts at reconciliation. I let them stew for a week before responding. In that time, I consulted with my lawyer about the legalities of my position and the potential acquisition of my father's business. I wanted to be precise in my approach, calculating rather than vindictive, strategic rather than emotional. Finally, I sent a brief email to all three of them. "I'm available to meet Thursday at 2 p.m. at my office. The address is below. Come prepared to discuss all financial matters thoroughly." My office at Next Gen Solutions occupied a corner of the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. I arranged for the meeting to be held in our main conference room, a sleek space with leather chairs, state-of-the-art presentation technology, and subtle indicators of corporate success. They arrived together, a united front of desperation. My father in a suit that had once fit him better, Diane in conservative business attire that couldn't quite hide her anxiety, and Jessica trailing behind them, attempting to project boredom despite the obvious tension in her posture. "Thank you for coming," I greeted them with professional courtesy, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "Would anyone like coffee or water before we begin?" They declined, exchanging nervous glances as they settled into their seats. "I'll get straight to the point," I began, opening the leather portfolio in front of me. "I've reviewed your financial situation extensively. The construction company is carrying unsustainable debt. The family home is 3 months into foreclosure proceedings, and your personal credit is severely compromised." "How do you know all this?" my father asked, his voice a mixture of shame and defensiveness. "Because I've purchased your outstanding business loan from First National Bank," I replied calmly. "I also control the mortgage on your home through a holding company I established. In essence, I am now your primary creditor." The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Jessica's mouth actually fell open, while Diane gripped the edge of the table so tightly, her knuckles whitened. "That's not possible," Diane said finally. "You can't just buy someone's debt like that." "Actually, it's not only possible, it's a common practice in financial markets," I explained, as if to a particularly slow student. "Banks sell underperforming loans all the time to minimize their exposure to default risk." My father had gone pale. "So you own our debt? All of it?" "Yes. The business loan of $320,000, the home mortgage with a remaining balance of $278,000, and the 3 credit cards you've maxed out trying to keep the business afloat, approximately $42,000 there." "Why?" Jessica blurted out. "Why would you do this?" "It's just business," I replied, echoing the phrase my father had used countless times throughout my childhood to explain his frequent absences or broken promises. "A calculated investment." "What do you want?" my father asked quietly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "That depends on what you're willing to offer," I said. "I have several options for how to proceed. I could call in the loans immediately, which would force the business into bankruptcy and accelerate the foreclosure on your home. Or we could negotiate more favorable terms." "We'll do anything," Diane interjected, her earlier hostility replaced by naked fear. "Just tell us what you want." "Don't make promises you can't keep, Diane," I cautioned. "You haven't heard my terms yet." I opened my laptop and turned it to face them, displaying a PowerPoint presentation I'd prepared. The first slide read, "Restructuring Proposal. Option 1. I foreclose on all assets immediately. You lose the business, the house, and face personal bankruptcy. Option 2. You sign over majority ownership of the construction company to me. I'll forgive 20% of the outstanding debt in exchange, and you, Richard, will remain as a general contractor earning a salary rather than an owner's draw. You'll vacate the family home, which I'll sell to recoup part of my investment, and move into a rental property. I own a modest 3-bedroom apartment where you'll pay below-market rent while you rebuild your credit." I clicked to the next slide, which detailed the specific financial arrangements. "Additionally, Jessica will return to college, a state school this time, not the private university you can't afford, and complete her degree. While studying, she'll work part-time as my administrative assistant to learn the value of earned income." "That's ridiculous," Jessica protested. "I'm not working as your secretary." "Administrative assistant," I corrected mildly. "And yes, you are if your parents want to avoid bankruptcy. Your choice, of course." "And what about me?" Diane asked, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "What humiliation do you have planned for me?" "You'll work in customer service at the construction company," I replied. "Answering phones, scheduling appointments, managing the office. The business is actually quite sound operationally. It's just been catastrophically mismanaged financially. With proper oversight, it could be profitable again within a year." "This is blackmail," Diane hissed. "No," I countered. This is capitalism. You're in a weak negotiating position because of your own poor decisions. I'm offering you a path forward that, while not ideal from your perspective, is considerably more generous than what any other creditor would provide. And if we refuse? My father asked. Then I exercise my rights as your creditor and initiate foreclosure and bankruptcy proceedings immediately. I said simply. You'll lose everything. Your credit will be destroyed for at least 7 years, and you'll be starting over from scratch just like I had to do when you threw me out. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica stared at the table. Diane's face was flushed with impotent fury, and my father looked utterly defeated. You have 24 hours to decide, I continued, closing my laptop. I've prepared all the necessary paperwork for either scenario. My lawyer will be available tomorrow at this same time to formalize whatever decision you make. I stood, signaling that the meeting was over. I suggest you discuss it thoroughly as a family. After all, important decisions should be made collectively by people who care about each other's welfare, shouldn't they? The irony of my statement wasn't lost on any of us. As they filed out, my father paused at the door. I never thought you could be this ruthless, he said quietly. I learned from the best, I replied. You and Diane taught me exactly what family loyalty is worth. After they left, I remained in the conference room, staring out at the city sprawled below. The confrontation had unfolded exactly as I'd planned, yet I felt none of the satisfaction I'd anticipated. Instead, a curious emptiness settled over me, the hollow recognition that revenge, even when perfectly executed, couldn't heal the wounds that had driven me to seek it. But it was too late to turn back now. The wheels were in motion, and tomorrow, one way or another, my former family would face the consequences of their actions, and I would finally close this chapter of my life. They accepted my terms. I hadn't doubted they would. They had no viable alternatives. My lawyer prepared the documents, and within a week, the ownership of my father's construction company had transferred to my control, with Richard retained as a general contractor rather than owner. The family home went on the market, and they moved into the apartment I owned, a decent but unremarkable unit in a building I'd acquired 6 months earlier as an investment property. Jessica, sullen but compliant, enrolled in the State University's business program and began working 20 hours a week as my administrative assistant. She proved surprisingly competent when properly motivated, though her attitude remained chilly and defensive. Diane struggled the most with the new arrangement. Working in customer service at the construction company clearly grated on her pride, but necessity forced her compliance. She maintained a brittle professionalism during business hours, but I occasionally caught glimpses of the rage simmering beneath her controlled facade. I implemented a comprehensive overhaul of the company's financial systems, cutting unnecessary expenses, renegotiating vendor contracts, and instituting proper accounting practices. Within 3 months, the business was cash flow positive again. By 6 months, it was generating modest but consistent profits. I visited the office weekly to review operations and financials. During these visits, I maintained a strictly professional demeanor, courteous but distant. I didn't gloat or micromanage. I didn't need to. My presence alone was a reminder of how dramatically the power dynamics had shifted. On a Wednesday evening in late autumn, nearly 3 years after I'd been thrown out of the family home, I received a text from my father asking if we could meet for dinner. Just the two of us, he specified. There's something important I'd like to discuss. We agreed to meet at a mid-range steakhouse, nice enough for a business dinner but not ostentatious. I arrived first, selecting a booth in the back where we could talk privately. My father looked better than he had in months when he arrived. The haunted, desperate expression he'd worn during our confrontation had faded, replaced by a cautious resolve. He'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost during the worst of the financial crisis, and his posture was straighter. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as he slid into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would. We have business interests to discuss," I replied neutrally. "That's not why I asked you here," he said. "This isn't about business." The waitress arrived to take our drink orders, providing a brief respite from the tension. Once she'd gone, my father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This was your mother's," he said, placing it on the table between us. Diane convinced me to put it in safety deposit box years ago. She said it was too valuable to keep at home. But I think she just didn't want you to have it. I stared at the box without touching it. It's her engagement ring, he continued. The one I gave her when we were young and broke and stupid in love. She wanted you to have it someday. Why are you giving this to me now? I asked, my voice betraying more emotion than I intended. Because it's yours, he said simply. It always was. And because I owe you more apologies than I could ever give in a lifetime. I finally reached for the box, opening it to reveal a modest diamond ring with a delicate gold band. I remembered it from my childhood, the way it would catch the light when my mother waved her hands as she spoke, which she always did when excited about something. I was a coward, my father continued while I examined the ring. After your mother died, I was lost. Diane. She was strong when I was weak. She made decisions, kept things moving forward. I surrendered my responsibility as a parent because it was easier than facing my grief. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said, closing the ring box carefully. No, it doesn't, he agreed. Nothing excuses it. When you came home that day and found your things packed, I knew it was wrong. I stood there and said nothing because I was afraid of losing Diane too, afraid of being alone. I chose my comfort over my daughter's welfare, and there's no forgiveness for that kind of betrayal. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the defensive, evasive man I'd confronted in the conference room. This was something closer to the father I remembered from childhood, capable of acknowledging his failures, even when they were monumental. The business is doing well again, he said, changing the subject. Your systems are working. We've even landed 2 new commercial contracts this month. I know, I replied. I review the financials every week. Of course you do, he smiled slightly. Always thorough. Our meals arrived, and we ate in silence for a few minutes. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it wasn't hostile either, just the quiet of 2 people with too much history and not enough resolution. Jessica's grades came back, he said eventually. She made the dean's list. This surprised me. Did she? She hasn't mentioned it. She wouldn't, he acknowledged. She's too proud. But she's working hard, both at school and at the office. You were right to push her back into education. I nodded, unsure how to respond to this unexpected validation. Diane's having a harder time adjusting, he continued. She blames me for everything. Says I should have fought you harder, found another way out of our financial mess. And what do you think? I asked. He considered the question carefully before answering. I think we're reaping what we sowed. And I think perhaps she never loved me the way I thought she did. Or maybe I never knew how to recognize real love after your mother died. We finished our meal with sporadic conversation about neutral topics, the unusually warm fall weather, a new restaurant that had opened downtown, a mutual acquaintance who'd relocated abroad. As we waited for the check, my father reached into his pocket again and pulled out a flash drive. There's one more thing, he said, sliding it across the table. I found these while clearing out some old files before the move. They're photos of you and your mother ones I'd forgotten we had. School plays, camping trips, her teaching you to bake cookies. I thought you might want them. I stared at the small device, my throat suddenly tight. Thank you, I managed. As we parted in the parking lot, my father hesitated, then asked, Is there any path back, Amber? Not to how things were, I know that's gone forever, but to something? Some kind of relationship? The question hung in the cool evening air between us. 6 months ago, I would have dismissed it outright. Now, I wasn't so certain. I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm not sure what that would even look like. He nodded, accepting this non-answer with resignation. Fair enough. Just know that I'm here, whenever or if ever you decide. I drove home with the velvet box and flash drive sitting on the passenger seat beside me, tangible reminders of a past I'd tried so hard to move beyond. The revenge I'd so carefully orchestrated had succeeded beyond my expectations. I'd regained control, established dominance, forced my tormentors to recognize their dependence on my mercy. So why did victory feel so hollow? The answer came 3 days later when I arrived at the office to find Diane waiting in the lobby of the building. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Privately, Curiosity, more than courtesy, prompted me to lead her to an empty conference room. As soon as the door closed behind us, her carefully maintained composure shattered. "I want you to stop," she demanded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Stop this charade of magnanimity. Stop pretending you're helping us when you're really just torturing us slowly." "I'm not pretending anything," I replied calmly. "The business is profitable again. You all have employment and housing. Jessica's back in school. Objectively speaking, you're in a much better position than you were 3 months ago." "At what cost?" she hissed. "Our dignity? Our independence? You've turned us into your personal servants, dancing to your tune for the privilege of barely surviving. As opposed to what you did to me?" I countered, my own composure slipping. "You threw me out without warning, stole my savings, and left me homeless. At least I gave you an apartment. It was never supposed to be permanent." Diane's voice rose. "Richard got cold feet about selling the house, so I pushed things forward. You were supposed to stay with friends for a week or two, then come back humbled and ready to contribute properly to the household. But you never came back, and Richard was too guilty to reach out." The absurdity of her revisionist history almost made me laugh. "That's not what you said when I came back for my money. You said," and I quote, "finally got rid of the dead weight." People say things in anger, she dismissed with a wave. "The point is, we're your family. This revenge scheme has gone far enough." "Family?" I repeated incredulously. "You've never treated me like family. From the day you married my father, you've resented my existence. I was a reminder of my mother, the woman he loved first and probably best." Something flickered in Diane's eyes, a flash of pain, quickly masked by renewed anger. "You don't know anything about my marriage or what I felt. I know you systematically isolated my father from his friends and family after the wedding," I replied, pieces suddenly connecting in my mind. "I know you controlled the finances even though he was the primary earner. I know you lavished attention and resources on Jessica while treating me like an unwelcome house guest. Those are classic patterns of manipulation and emotional abuse." "How dare you?" she sputtered. "I dare because I've spent 3 years rebuilding my life after you nearly destroyed it," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "I dare because I earned everything I have now through hard work and sacrifice while you were busy spending my father's money on Jessica's 4th attempt at college." The door opened suddenly, and Jessica herself stood there, her expression a mixture of shock and something harder to define. "I heard shouting," she said. "What's going on?" Diane immediately shifted her demeanor, her face crumpling into a tearful mask. "Your stepsister is being cruel again, sweetheart. She won't listen to reason about our family situation." Jessica looked between us, her gaze settling on her mother with unexpected clarity. "Stop it, Mom. Just stop." "What?" Diane blinked in surprise. "The manipulation, the victim act, all of it," Jessica said wearily. "I heard what you were saying, about throwing Amber out, about it being temporary." She made air quotes around the word. "That's not what you told me at the time. You said she was lazy and entitled, and we were better off without her." Diane's face hardened. "Whose side are you on?" "I'm not on anyone's side," Jessica replied. "I'm just tired of the lies. You've been lying to Dad for years about our finances, lying to me about why we needed to get rid of Amber, lying to everyone about everything." She turned to me, her expression guarded but earnest. "I'm not saying what we did was right. It wasn't. But she's been playing us all against each other for years. And I'm done being her puppet." Diane's face contorted with fury. "After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By siding with her?" "That's the problem, Mom," Jessica said quietly. "You think love is a transaction. You gave me things so I'd take your side, so I'd be loyal to you above everyone else. That's not love. That's control." The insight, coming from the last person I'd have expected it from, rendered me momentarily speechless. Diane looked between us, her carefully constructed reality collapsing around her. "She should have been thrown out years ago," she spat, dropping all pretense of reconciliation. "She was never part of this family, never belonged with us. I just had the courage to finally say it." With that, she stormed out, leaving Jessica and me alone in the conference room, united for the first time by the unexpected recognition of Diane's true nature. I'm sorry, Jessica said after a long silence. For my part in what happened to you. I was jealous of you, your grades, your focus, the way people respected you. It was easier to side with Mom than to admit I felt inferior. The apology, imperfect but seemingly genuine, caught me off guard. Thank you for saying that, I replied cautiously. Jessica nodded, then said, For what it's worth, I think your revenge has worked. Not because of the financial stuff, though that was pretty badass. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. But because you made us see ourselves clearly, maybe for the first time. At least, you made me see myself. And I don't particularly like what I see. As she turned to leave, I felt a strange shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of the tight knot of resentment I'd carried for so long. The tables had indeed turned, but in ways far more complex and meaningful than I'd anticipated when I'd set this plan in motion. The fallout from Diane's meltdown was swift and decisive. The next day, I informed my father that while I would continue to employ him at the construction company, Diane's position was terminated, effective immediately. He accepted this without argument, the resignation in his eyes suggesting he'd been anticipating such a reckoning for years. Jessica, surprisingly, stepped up to fill her mother's administrative role at the office temporarily while continuing her studies. She approached the work with unexpected dedication, as if trying to prove something to me, to herself, or perhaps to her absent mother. Diane moved out of the apartment shortly afterward, relocating to her sister's home in another state. The separation from my father wasn't formal yet, but the distance spoke volumes about the direction their relationship was heading. As for my father, our dinner conversation had marked a turning point, but not a resolution. Trust, once broken so completely, couldn't be repaired with a single apology or gesture, no matter how sincere. Instead, we established a cautious professional relationship that occasionally allowed glimpses of our former connection to surface. 6 months after acquiring the construction company, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to sell the business not to an outside investor, but back to my father, at a fair market value with reasonable financing terms. The company was stable again. Systems were in place to prevent the financial mismanagement that had nearly destroyed it. And with Diane's influence removed, there was no reason my father couldn't successfully run it once more. Why would you do this? He asked when I presented the proposal. After everything that happened? Because holding on to it was never about the business itself, I explained. It was about proving I could take back what was taken from me, about showing I had the power to control your fate the way you once controlled mine. I've proven that point, and now I'm tired of looking backward. The relief and gratitude in his eyes was payment enough. We signed the papers the following week, transferring majority ownership back to him while I retained a small stake, just enough to justify periodic review of the financials to ensure the company's continued stability. I made a similar decision regarding Jessica's education and employment. Instead of continuing to employ her directly, I established a scholarship fund that would cover her remaining tuition and expenses, provided she maintained her excellent academic standing and completed an internship program I'd arranged with a respected financial firm. The opportunity offered her a path to genuine independence, free from both my oversight and her mother's manipulation. I don't understand, she said when I explained the arrangement. I thought you wanted me under your thumb. I wanted you to understand consequences, I corrected. You've shown that you do. Now it's time for you to build your own life, not serve as a pawn in the game between your mother and me. With these decisions made, I felt a weight lifting a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. The business of revenge was exhausting, consuming mental and emotional energy I could better invest elsewhere. Tyler had been right all along. The best revenge wasn't making others suffer, but creating a life so full and rich that past injuries lost their power to hurt. Speaking of Tyler, our relationship had deepened throughout this tumultuous period. His steady presence and unwavering support had been my anchor when vengeance threatened to pull me under. We'd moved in together 6 months earlier, and recently, we'd begun discussing marriage not as an urgent necessity, but as a natural evolution of our partnership. We'd found a beautiful Victorian house that needed extensive renovation but had spectacular potential. The project excited us, both a tangible representation of building something new together, rather than dwelling on past grievances. Michelle's restaurant empire continued to thrive, with 2 new locations opening in neighboring cities. She'd offered me a formal partnership, which I'd accepted with enthusiasm. The work was challenging and rewarding, free from the complicated emotions that had colored my involvement with my father's business. As my 30th birthday approached, a date that once triggered painful memories, I found myself looking forward to the milestone rather than dreading it. Tyler planned a small celebration with our closest friends at our new home, which we'd just finished renovating after months of intensive work. The evening of my birthday, I surveyed the gathering with a sense of quiet amazement. Zoe was there with her new boyfriend, laughing as she recounted stories from our college days. Michelle had brought her teenage son, now a tall, thoughtful young man considering business schools. Tyler moved among our guests, the perfect host, his easy smile catching mine across the room. These were my people, my chosen family. They'd stood by me during my darkest moments, believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself, and celebrated each step forward without judgment or condition. As I watched them, I realized that the revenge I'd so meticulously plotted had ultimately given me something unexpected: freedom. Not just financial independence, but emotional liberation from the people who had defined my worth through their conditional love. The tables had turned, yes, but more importantly, I had turned toward a future built on my terms. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. When I answered, there was no one there, just a small package on the doorstep with a card attached. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. Inside the box was my mother's recipe book, filled with her handwritten notes and cooking wisdom. The card was simple: "Happy 30th birthday. She would be so proud of the woman you've become." I am too. I stood in the doorway, holding this unexpected gift, emotions washing over me in waves. Not forgiveness exactly, some wounds were too deep for simple healing, but perhaps understanding. And with it, a willingness to move forward without the weight of bitterness. Tyler appeared beside me, concern in his eyes. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. "Everything is okay." He wrapped an arm around my waist as we returned to our guests, to the home and life we were building together. The journey from that rainy night when I'd been kicked out to this moment had been arduous and often painful. But standing here now, I wouldn't change a single step. The best revenge wasn't destroying those who hurt you. It was creating something so beautiful from the ruins that they could only watch and wonder, knowing they had no claim to your triumph. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch or dealt with family betrayal, I hope my story resonated with you. Has someone's rejection ever become your redirection to something better? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it touched something in you. Subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes. Getting kicked out is just the universe making room for something greater. Thank you for listening to my journey. Here's to writing our own stories, not as victims, but as the heroes we were always meant to be.